My name's Joleen, and I'm a survivor of domestic abuse, sexual abuse, religious abuse, and emotional abuse, kind of a little bit of a bunch of things thrown in there. My parents got divorced when I was pretty small. My parents got divorced, I think it was like about 6. So growing up, my mom became a Christian pretty early. I was in like pre-kindergarten. I went to like a private Christian school. My mom and my teacher kind of talked a lot, and my mom ended up becoming a Christian through that. I met this guy. He worked with a friend's fiance. He was actually Evangelical Fundamentalist from an OK church. He was about 5 years older than me. I was like 19, about to be 20. He's actually interested in me. Like, he asked my friends about me, and we ended up going out. So he knew, because I was very strict, that I was planning on being a virgin till I was married. We were at my mom's house, and we were downstairs on the couch and watching like TV or something. We were kind of cuddling. It seemed like next thing I knew, like my pants were down and he was inside of me. And I just, I froze. I'm like, I'm not a virgin now. I said stop multiple times before. I think he was pretending not to hear me because he didn't want to. He did stop. I was crying and I said something along the lines, I can't believe that I just lost my virginity. And he said something along the lines of, oh no, this doesn't count. One day, we'll get married. We'll go on a cruise, it'd be romantic, and then, that'd be your real first time then. At the time, I'm like, okay, well, maybe it doesn't count, maybe it'd be okay. But the very next time I saw him, same thing happened. At that point, I just gave up. I'm just like, well, I'm not a virgin. No other Christian guy's gonna want me. We were together for close to a year and a half, but he was very emotionally abusive. I'm very thin, and he called me. He tried to control how I dressed. He didn't want me to look attractive. He ended up actually breaking up with me. He said that he had talked to the elders of his church, and they had told him that essentially I was a bad influence. I was bringing him down the wrong path, especially so I was blamed for all abuse. They told him he should break up with me and never talk to me again. And he was framing it as, well, I am breaking up with you, but instead of never talking to you again, I think what we're going to do is you'll get right on your path with God, and I'll make sure I get right with my path with God. And then after a little bit, maybe we can get together and then maybe get married in a few months after that, once we're right and on the right path. After we broke up, he kept on trying to call, and he wanted to have, and he would want me to take pictures for him, and basically he wanted all the stuff without any sort of relationship. I'm really proud of myself. At one point, I was talking to him on the phone and it offended me. It was personal, and I said, none of your business, and I hung up on him. And that was the last time I talked to him. He tried calling again, but I never talked to him again. I ended up kind of reconnecting with someone from high school. I go with a group of friends to the beach, and I see this old friend, and I'm like, oh, they've filled out since high school. They look cute, and I am not the most subtle person. And I was flirting up a storm with them. I knew that they were Catholic, which was not an acceptable group. But at that point, I'm like, well, close enough. If anybody's interested in me and still wants me, that is just some sort of Christian, close enough. I'm like, I'll take it. That person that ended up being my partner didn't really seem to care about the fact that I wasn't, we were dating for a while, but people kind of caught on that they were Catholic. They started off doing sermons and kind of throwing some anti-Catholic stuff into the sermons. And then associate pastor at the time who was actually kind of a friend. He was on the worship team and the singing group, essentially. Like he played the piano and he was the associate pastor too. Him and his wife invited us over to dinner, and I told my ex-spouse, like, I know what this is. They're trying to figure out if you're really a Christian. Be very vague. They're going to ask you about your testimony, which means how you became a Christian and like your spiritual walk with God. The first meeting was just me and the associate pastor meeting one-on-one. And this is supposed to be following some biblical principles that it talks about, like laid out in the Bible. I forget the verses. First, it was just him meeting with me and essentially saying, hey, we know you're with a Catholic. Catholics aren't Christian. You know, it's not okay to be with a Catholic. You're yoking yourself with an unbeliever. So you need to break up with this person. You need to not have anything to do with the Catholic Church from now on. You know, you need to turn from this, or you will have to step down from your position in church and essentially be considered a non-Christian from here on, like from there forward. And I was like, no. And I knew there was going to be more steps because there's steps in the process. And so not long after, met with, they called me in for, another meeting, and it was with him and my brother-in-law. Essentially, same sort of thing, like, hey, no, you're with a Catholic, going through different Bible verses, trying to tell me, why Catholicism was wrong. But, I wasn't going to tell them the real reason why I thought it was okay to be with a Catholic, like, hey, I was raped, felt like Catholic was as close as I could get, Yeah, I didn't tell them that, I just was kind of like, no. And the last step is they're supposed to bring you out in front of the church and like essentially do this in front of the whole congregation. But the senior pastor at the time, I guess, didn't like the idea of that for whatever reason. And so instead, they brought up the matter to the elder board. The elder boards decided like, hey, yeah, it will give them that one last chance, like to, repent, turn from their ways. If they don't, they're excommunicated. Associate pastor met with me the one last time and I was excommunicated. It was a very small group. The church I went to was really small, but they control a lot of things. You would be really shamed. You could be excommunicated for, being too sinful, essentially. But, they told you how to dress. Like you had to be very, they wanted you to be modest. Different people had some different expectations, but, no cleavage. They don't want you showing shoulders. Shoulders are kind of... I only wore things that were knee length, wore a lot of skirts, tried to be pretty feminine. You can't have certain relationships with non-Christians. They don't like you getting too close. Most of your relationships with people outside of the group are supposed to be trying to bring them in, convert them. Essentially, your whole life should be revolving around this. There's this thing they said, drink your orange juice to the glory of God. I personally feel that my ex-spouse has something like narcissistic personality disorder. I can't diagnose them because, I'm not their provider and I really shouldn't be the person to diagnose them. But I think they are. But there's lots of triangulation and control there. They also would do things and I found out some of these things, weren't true. They were saying, and this is right before a birthday, they went on a work trip, for training, and other coworkers were there, and this is the day before my birthday, but they were gonna come back kind of the morning of, and so they had had the training, they got plastered, and they weren't answering their phone. I was just trying to say hey, good night, but I couldn't get a hold of them. I was kind of worried. Didn't hear from them until the next day. And, it was my birthday and they wanted to sleep in bed all day and because they were and they had told me that while they were on that trip that they had gotten really and they were flirting with their coworker, and they almost had an affair. I found out later that no, that absolutely did not happen. That coworker was not interested in them, had no sort of thing, but I really think like they were trying to make me jealous or trying to make me feel like I had to compete for them. So I started going to pre-nursing, and this is when I met who ended up being the person I was forced into a polyamorous relationship with. During like pre-nursing, I met this person. She seemed super duper sweet and was younger than me. We got along really well. There was gonna be this party for a classmate, a birthday party. My spouse was going to be coming with, and this was before transitioning or anything. I knew my spouse would find this person attractive. This new person was exactly what they like, their ideal, much more close to their ideal than I was, and I'm like, oh yeah, I know they're going to be into them. We were like, and like the rules were supposed to be that we only did things with other people, with other present. It was always like together, like we're supposed to do this together. It had become clear that this person I ended up, being forced to be with, wasn't interested in me and was only interested in my spouse. They started doing things together alone. The rules didn't really change for me quite at the time, but they changed for my spouse. The worst part was that they wanted me to be in the house, not in the room, but in the house while they were doing things. She realized if I want to get with this person, I have to get with the couple. I have to include Joleen. Like, she started making the moves on me, and then it became like this three-way thing. But she started pushing more and more and more. It was so often, like, sometimes it'd be like 8 times in a day, like, just over and over, and I didn't want to. I didn't want to. Sometimes, I would say no, and that would result in one of two ways. Either the no would turn into her curling into a ball and crying for hours until I agreed to have, or she would just essentially ignore it and keep going. And so just like over and over and over again, I'm being violated by this person in front of my spouse. And I talked to them about it, and they acknowledge that yes, this is rape. But the reason that they are doing this is to keep us around. They think this is all that's going to keep us around. I was really depressed. I was suicidal. I wanted help. And so I got my spouse to agree to let me go to counselor at school. It's just, they're students, but go to counselor at school. I went and I told them, and the only thing the counselor said to me was, have you talked to her about the way she approaches you? And I'm just like, I am telling you about active abuse that's happening to me, and you're just asking me if I've talked to her about how she approaches me. I'm like, this person's not going to help me. This was my only chance for help, so I was stuck. We ended up proposing. More me. I popped the question even though I didn't really want to. Obviously, this wouldn't be a legal marriage or anything because bigamy is not legal. I felt so stuck, and I'm like, now I'm gonna be married to this person. And so I was just like, no, I can't do this anymore. And so I came up with a plan, and it's kind of ugly, but I was like, okay, well, we're poly or whatever. I'm gonna try find someone, to date real quick, essentially, to, feel good, feel wanted for a bit, and then I was going to off myself. I find somebody, and I meet up with him, and he was really super sweet, and we start seeing each other. Like one day he stops me and he says, "Are they treating you okay?" And I just break down. I just break down crying because it's like I felt no one had seen me. He's the first person that said anything. And I felt crazy because all this time, like, both of them are telling me, I'm blowing things out of proportion, that I'm not seeing things right, that these things didn't really happen, that I've been gaslighted so much. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it is real. It's happening. Somebody sees it. Somebody finally sees it. He helped me start making a plan to break up and get out. My ex-spouse talked to me a few times. They wanted me to stay a little bit to help pay rent and like stuff for a little. I did stay for a teeny little bit, which I probably shouldn't have. So I'm sitting with my two partners, my ex-spouse and my other partner at the time. And like we're outside and we're gonna have dinner, and I pull out a card, like a letter, like a piece of paper, And my spouse starts freaking out, like, oh no, I know something big's happening. And essentially I just started telling them like, hey, you've been mistreating me for a long time, and I'm not going to stay for it anymore. I feel like I try to go out of my way to be nice to you guys, and you just interpret everything I do in the worst possible way. Like, I'm just so mean and horrible. I said something along the lines. Now, I was still kind of protecting them to an extent at this time, but I said something along the lines to like my one abuser, like, you put me in situations I didn't want to be in. She kind of teared up a little bit, but she never talked to me ever again. I did write them a letter eventually, being more direct about what they actually did. I wouldn't have been so as nice if I wrote that letter today. I think I told my abuser, I told her, you raped me. Whether you were trying to or not, you raped me. You raped me multiple times. Like, I finally said it. And I told my spouse, like, this person raped me, and that wasn't a deal breaker for you. This was a deal maker. Like, I finally confronted them totally about it. I've given them a chance to express some sort of remorse or anything, but they don't. They're not sorry for what they did. I'm doing so much better. I mean, it was like after I had gotten out, I felt so free and excited. And then it's like after a while, it's like surviving after surviving. I felt like seeing them everywhere. Like, I felt like their faces were on everybody that resembled them, even remotely. I was having nightmares every night, sometimes multiple times a night, where I would be so sweaty that I would soak the sheets, like pee the bed level sweaty. Like, that's how wet I was. I've been in therapy, and so that's been really going great. This is the longest I've lasted with the therapist, and she's a really great fit, and I feel like she really, she specializes in trauma, and so I feel like she really gets it. And I have a psychiatric nurse practitioner that helps manage my medications. I'm having a better support network. I'm starting to try to reach out more and be more present with the friends I do have, and to make more friends, because you isolate a lot. And so I feel like I'm gaining my life back. I'm hoping to become a psychiatric nurse practitioner. It may still take a little bit because going back to school is rough. Again, that's a little daunting, but I plan to do it. I plan to become a psychiatric nurse practitioner. I hope with this kind of stuff, I may be writing a book, maybe, doing talks. I want to help other people, like, after this stuff happened to me, I tried to look up stuff, I tried to look up females who rape females and everything. It's like, if it even talks about a female who can rape, like, that's a rapist or anything, it's always like taking advantage of a man. It's in this heterosexual context, and that wasn't my situation. And I feel like it happens. And I did find some articles, but I think there needs to be more about there's queer people out there that, just because someone's queer doesn't necessarily mean they're safe. And that's something I find a lot in the queer community. It's like because it is your community, it's your safety net. But just because someone's in that community doesn't mean they're safe. Also, like, just because they seem innocent or they seem inexperienced in life doesn't mean they're safe. So, now I'm an employee health nurse with my company. I am super involved in our diversity, equity, and inclusion. I've gotten to make so many things happen in my company and in my community to help others. I've gotten to be on, there's this county out here, one of the counties out here, I got to be on their suicide prevention council. My husband and we ended up getting married about 4 years after I had gotten divorced. He's great. He's really talented at making music, electronic music. He loves animals. He's hoping to go back to school to become a vet tech. So that'd be awesome. I hope to help him through that. But he's such a sweetheart. And he's also really great with all my trauma stuff. He has his own trauma and he gets it. And he realizes, when I'm having a trauma response, he knows what to do. And he is just honestly, such a great partner. So there's hope. There's healthy love out there. There are people that will love you for who you are and will understand your trauma and your background and who will care and will give you the patience and the kindness you need. There are people out there. Don't settle. Don't keep those bad people around. Don't settle for all that bad treatment. Wait around for the good ones.